Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our session today. Really pleased to have all of you with us. I'm Sophie Swift. I'll be moderating today's session with James Lupton and Glenn Hofmann. We'll be discussing driving business value with AI. Really pleased to have you all on the session with us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do dive into the meat of today's session. You'll notice that everybody's on mute. Given the nature of this topic, it's really popular. We know that AI is a buzzword across lots and lots of conversations, not just in the data space at the moment. So we've got lots and lots of attendees with us today. Would really appreciate your input via the chat and the Q&A. Let us know where you're dialing in from today. I'm in a not so sunny Nottingham. Would be great to hear where you are. We've also got the Q&A if you want to ask us questions as we go through the session. We'll have time as we go through to pose questions to both James and Glenn. And we'll also have some time at the end, hopefully, to get through as many as we can. We might also have a couple questions for you as we go through. So again, any engagement, participation you can give us about your experience with AI today is very welcome. For those of you who don't know us at Cynozure, we are a data analytics and AI strategy company supporting organizations and individuals to fulfill their data potential. So that means we help companies with their full end-to-end data journey, and that typically sits under 6 main areas of support. Put a couple of those on the screen for you. So that sits under data and AI strategy, all the way through to helping organizations to put in place the processes and skills and people around data management, data culture, tech, and program leadership to start driving data value from their data programs. Today specifically, we're looking at AI, and we've got a really good agenda for you. So we'll start by looking at what the current AI landscape looks like, where AI might have the most impact for your organization. And we know that that will differ slightly depending on industries. So really interesting conversation there. And then we'll also look at what we can do as individuals to prepare. How can we help the organizations we represent to get ready for AI if we haven't started already? And we've got some really useful frameworks and tips for you to take away to look at your company's AI readiness. So let me introduce today's host to you. So I'll be moderating, I'll be taking your questions in the background. Keep them coming as we go through. We've got James, CTO at Cynozure, and Glenn, former CAO of New York Life with us today. James, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm James. I look after our technology work here at Cynozure with a particular focus at the moment on AI, which is why I'm here talking to you today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Perfect. And Glenn?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Glenn Hofmann. I've been doing what we now call AI for most of my career. Data science and AI, and most recently, until about 2 months ago, I was the Chief Analytics Officer at New York Life for 7 years.
Awesome. So really looking forward to the discussion today. Without further ado, let's dive straight in. James, I know you're going to do some scene setting for us to kick us off.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sophie. So why are we here today? Well, all of you are probably in organizations that have got a bunch of people who've been excited by ChatGPT, particularly, and the similar tools that have boomed out around that. And you've potentially got executive teams, boards, and so on, demanding that you do something with AI, perhaps without really knowing what that means or where you should focus. There's definitely lots of FOMO at the moment, and it's a complex topic to engage around and to know where to start as well, because it's a really broad landscape. So today we're going to be exploring some of those themes and helping you build a way of framing this to have productive conversations internally about where your business should be focusing, how it might impact you, and the kind of things you need to do to actually be successful with this and not end up in the news swearing at customers. So we're not going to spend ages talking about definitions of AI and what we mean by it. You know, for the purposes of this session, we're using AI in a sort of very broad brush, broad church kind of way. So everything from data science and classic machine learning workloads through to the newer generative AI or deep learning or reinforcement learning, all of that's kind of in scope of what we're talking about here. But there's no doubt it is the generative AI side of things that has driven a lot of the sort of hype cycle around this topic at the moment, and is the thing that's got really people really engaged with this. For the purposes of this talk, though, there is two particular things that we wanted to draw a distinction on that we might reference later. And this is about just sort of broadly categorizing AI into two large schools of things. On the left, we've got our traditional AI, our workloads and use cases that are mature, have been around quite a while now. This is things like, say, predictive analytics, for fraud detection, for example. It's things like recommendations of products, it's segmentations of customers, and a whole load of other things in there. Very sort of logical and deterministic in its nature. And then we've got the newer wave of stuff, which is much more creative and about generating new content based on old content. So that might be text, it might be images, it might be audio, visual. There's quite a number of different ways that is manifesting, but it's opened up a whole new bunch of ways that we can actually interact and leverage AI and bring it into our day-to-days. So to scene set, we wanted to talk a bit about where is AI right now on its journey, and to start with, take a bit of a look back. So something that I've definitely learned and experienced is people love to talk when you talk about AI about how it's not new, and they're right. It isn't new. AI as a concept's been around a long time, especially in things like science fiction, and we could probably draw this chart going even further off to the left if we really wanted to. But there's kind of two main takeaways I want to draw out from this. So the first one is that AI as a concept isn't new. There's been practical applications of it for a very long time, you know, going back decades and decades. So it's an approach and a concept that has been steadily evolving and had a lot of thought put into it and its potential over a long time. And in many ways, those early ideas are still very relevant. There just wasn't the ability to execute on them at the time. But the second, perhaps more important thing to take away is that the pace of change here is speeding up. You know, when we look at things like ChatGPT launching its GPT-1 back in 2014, and then it's gone through various iterations. I remember seeing, I think it was ChatGPT or GPT-2 many years ago in tech blogs that I was reading. At that point, it was much more basic than it is today, but it was showing how it could kind of create HTML code to build websites based on prompts and so on. You know, we look in the short time between 2014 to 2022, how that's moved forward. That was 3.5. We've got 4. There's an expectation that we'll have 5 perhaps sometime this year. So the gap between leaps in this is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the pace of change is kind of ever increasing, which makes all of our jobs even harder. Glenn, I mean, I don't know what you see in this.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I think that timeline is very interesting. I mean, the term artificial intelligence was coined sort of in advance at this Dartmouth conference in 1956, and they actually chose the term artificial intelligence because you know, that was more of an academic politics kind of decision, because cybernetics was taken by other people and they didn't want to work with them, so they called it artificial intelligence and made up a new term. But they kind of figured they'd have this thing, you know, kind of figured out in one summer, in like, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, and here we are talking about artificial intelligence almost 70 years later, and I have a chance we'll probably still be going to be talking about it, you know, 50 years from now. So I think that's interesting. But I think the current iteration of large language models, you know, is probably about, you know, 5 to 6 years old, and there, you know, there was BERT and there was GPT, you know, what we now call GPT-1, I guess. And it wasn't clear which one of those would succeed. You know, BERT being more of a bidirectional approach, and GPT being a unidirectional approach to training these models. So, you know, so that has been around for 5 years, not 1 year. I think that's good to remember.
So looking ahead then to what's going to define the year ahead of us, given we're still pretty early in it at this point, I think there's a number of things we can see coming that are going to be fairly defining features of 2024, and probably a bunch of stuff that hasn't even crossed our minds or hit the headlines yet. So we've got major lawsuits going on that are probably going to be fundamental in shaping what this landscape's going to look like. New York Times suing OpenAI and Azure around copyright infringements, going to be fundamentally definitional when it comes to how people can use and consume open data on the web, and will no doubt generate a number of laws around it. We've got regulation coming. We've had the EU launched regulation. There's a great blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that the White House has put out, which actually I think is a great way for people to think internally about how to build responsible AI as well. We've got demand for hardware. You know, GPU demand is going to be one of the frontline battlefields for the AI race, and being able to get your hands on suitable quantities and high enough quality of equipment to actually build and run models on is going to be really, really key. We're starting to see consumer hardware, both specific AI tools like the Rabbit R1 and the AI pin, but also if you look at Samsung's new S24 launches, a huge feature of that has been how embedded AI is across their platform. So even in, you know, the most perhaps common consumer electronics good, the smartphone, it's now a feature that's highly advertised. Failed projects are going to abound. If everyone was watching the news, you'd have seen DPD recently having a bit of an embarrassing chatbot experiment where people could write poems about how terrible the company was in it and get it to swear. So we're going to see more of those failures as people perhaps rush a little bit too quickly without full understanding to public use cases. Energy and climate's going to be a big consideration. Using AI and building AI consumes an awful lot of energy. So companies are going to have to grapple with how they reconcile green energy goals and their environmental objectives with the use of this stuff. There'll be an ever-increasing march to commoditization going on here as it becomes more and more accessible. You know, this has been one of the shining features of the likes of ChatGPT and its competitors. It's how anyone can get involved in using these tools with a very low barrier to entry. And we'll see more and more vendors increasingly integrate this stuff into their platforms. And then model competition, we're definitely still in the race where the systems themselves, the models that underlie all of these tools, not just the large language models, but across many of the different disciplines of AI, are still in a battle to become better, faster, more capable over time as well. And that race is going to continue amongst the big players as they each try to create the next breakthrough in this space. Glenn, I mean, what's big for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, from a corporate perspective, you know, the key things here are probably, you know, figuring out what it is useful for and what it is not useful for. And it could be not useful for technical reasons or you know, consumer impact reasons. Those are all relevant. And then, you know, how are you going to govern it? You know, are you going to wait for the regulation and the lawsuits, or are you going to, you know, be proactive and govern it in an ethical way yourself in the meantime, you know, in your company?
Cool. It's I think definitely that regulation piece is going to be one of the big ones that's going to send shockwaves through people if there's moves they don't expect. And it could put some people in an awkward position who've built and got into this stuff quickly, who then are no longer compliant with this stuff. Great. So moving on, I want to talk a bit now about how AI is going to impact you. But before we do that, Sophie.
Yeah, we've got a very short poll for everybody, just to get a feel for how much you think AI is going to disrupt the industry that you're working in. And it's just 5 options and range from not at all the way up to complete business model transformation. Really interested to see what people think the impact of AI is or is going to be. I'll leave that up for few more seconds to give everybody a chance to respond.
It's interesting to see already with the results coming in there.
Yeah.
I've conducted some form of this poll in numerous sort of talks and sessions, and slowly but steadily the share of results is starting to skew more and more towards the impactful end of the register. But still today, I often find it can be 50-50 between no, I don't think it's a big or not, through to, yeah, it's going to be game changing.
Brilliant. I'm just sharing the results there. Don't know if that's what you would have expected, James.
Yeah, so you're seeing interesting. In fact, I'm surprised actually that many people are seeing that complete business model transformation. I think that's great to see. Actually, in a lot of conversations I've had, people aren't necessarily recognizing that yet. So hopefully that speaks to like a broader growing awareness for people of what this stuff means for them.
Perfect.
Sophie, somehow that's got right in the middle of my screen and I can't click it to hide it out of the way. I don't know if you're able to stop sharing that. So how AI is going to impact is, if there's one thing you take away from today, I think really getting to grips with this and thinking about it is really important. It obviously looks like we've got a group of people who are in a mindset that this stuff is going to be impactful and it's going to be meaningful. And for me, I think it is hugely impactful. In fact, I'm putting it on a level of the internet of personal computing, of the internal combustion engine, in terms of how impactful it's actually going to be to all our organizations. And the reason I think that has been shaped in part by this model on screen. Highly recommend checking out the article. If you Google the source at the bottom there, Roger Martin, Flattening Technologies, there's a great piece on Medium, doesn't take too long to read, that lays all this out. But he talks about flattening technologies, and flattening technology is a technology so dominant that it wipes out any existing competitive structure that doesn't embrace it. So basically, if you're not using and working with this tool, then you have no hope of being competitive with your competitors. And now it goes through a cycle where you get the sort of emergence of these technologies coming along, and as they grow, they both destroy value, so they wipe out industries and related industries, and new ones spring up and around as they go, and then eventually it becomes the norm. So think of something like the internet. It destroyed numerous industries along the way. Look at blockbusters, and Netflix is a perfect example of this. The internet created the possibility to stream content into our homes, an entirely new business model for sharing entertainment, and Blockbuster didn't adapt to that technology, didn't embrace it fully, and eventually was wiped out because of it. And the important thing is that where it ends up, it's just an essential piece of the furniture, basically. You couldn't conceive of running a business without it. And again, it's easy to think of the internet there. Imagine trying to set up a new business that didn't in some way use the internet as part of it, even if it was as simple as having a website so people could find your business and contact you, for example. It wouldn't be possible to scale. And I think AI is headed on that trajectory. I think we are looking at a future, and maybe that's in 1 year, maybe that's in 10 years. It's hard to say at this point. But we're looking at a future where if you haven't embraced this technology, if you're not using it to make your business more efficient in how you run it, or if you're not using it to deliver new goods and services, you will not be able to compete with the people that are. You'll be running teams of 100 software engineers, where others only need 10 and are therefore able to be far more nimble and cheaper, for example. So I really like this framing of flattening technologies. And there's a great piece of this then is about how do you respond to one of these? You can invent it. Well, most of us can't invent these things, and we've certainly missed the boat on AI. You can invest heavily to become an early market leader. So that's what the Azures, the OpenAIs, AWSs, Googles of the world are doing. They're trying to become a dominant player in the key aspects of this flattening technology. Or you can combine your key customer insights and your knowledge with the flattening technology to build a great product and service. So that's like the Steve Jobs route. You know, Apple often get criticized for not bringing anything new to the table, but what they are brilliant at is taking existing flattening technologies, the personal computer, the internet, and those sorts of devices, and crafting a brilliant customer experience that removes the pain points that people don't like and doubles down on the bits that are great. So I think there's two broad ways that you can think about that impact, and then Glenn's going to talk us through some examples of those things. The first broad impact for you will be that business model change piece. So are you in an organization who the fundamental core of what you do is going to have to change? So the horse and cart carriage industry is a great example of this. You had highly successful and lots of different modes of personal transport before the invention of the internal combustion engine and then the car and associated technology platforms. But when the car came out, we quickly saw the erosion of those industries. You know, in these pictures on the left, you've got one car in a street full of horses and carts, and on the right, you've got one horse and cart in a car full of streets that are only a few years apart. Really hard to react to, but the founder of General Motors, he was the founder of Durant Dort's carriage company. So they were a massive player in carriage, but he saw what was coming. He pivoted his business model and, you know, drove some great success out of that. Others, not so much. The other side of this then, because not everyone's going to be impacted by business model change, is the operational change. And I think this impacts everyone. So this is the day-to-day running of your business. This is something that everyone's going to be impacted in, and where we're all going to have to make sure we stay competitive with what we're doing and delivering the best service. So, you know, whether that's switching switchboards that we used to have all the way through to now enabling chatbots and agents, whether it's how we manage HR or people, there's lots of different ways that it's going to impact our operational day-to-day that we're going to need to adopt in order to be an efficient business and stay competitive with our peers. So, Dan, I'm going to pass over to you, and we can explore some of those themes and some examples of the way people are going to be impacted.
Yeah, so we sort of broke it up in you know, three basic categories here. One is sort of the daily efficiency piece, which is going to affect a lot of people, you know, in I mean, in companies, but in personal life and so on. So so some examples here are you know, software engineering and legal departments and compliance departments, where basically there's this sort of co-pilot type software, and there's going to be a lot more sort of specialized software emerging that makes the current processes in these professions just a lot more efficient, right? So software engineering will get a lot more efficient, or has gotten a lot more efficient, when AI is, you know, writing the first version of your code, and you just have to kind of adjust it a little bit and keep going. Same with, you know, legal research, legal document creation, and so on. So the legal profession is going to be impacted in like a number of different ways by this, and just it just gets a lot, you know, made a lot more efficient. HR is the same way. You know, HR by nature is very unstructured data, you know, heavy, and there was really a lot of you know, I mean, anywhere from job descriptions to performance reviews to, you know, any number of documents that HR people consume or produce. So that's sort of so that's happening today in companies where it's accessible to those professionals, and it's going to be increasing, you know, quite a bit more. So those are just some examples, but it's probably, you know, this is probably relevant for many different job roles in companies where this technology just kind of makes certain tasks much more efficient, or even maybe not, you know, not needing humans anymore in their sort of daily, you know, daily life. So I think that's pretty hard. I mean, you know, you can take this further. This will eventually kind of, you know, change job roles in these professions, and maybe make these professions even more relevant than they are today. I mean, think of HR, for example, where you have today, the HR business partner will often ask the manager, which of their employees is at risk for leaving the company, right? But really, HR has a lot of unstructured data from performance reviews to, employee emails and IMs and meetings and all that. So they could actually analyze all this and tell the manager, who's likely to attrite, from an employee attrition perspective. So that that also opens up, a lot of new avenues for these professions. But the first impact is just efficiency. So I mean, marketing is another example there, or creative creation is potentially falls in that category. And there are already several software companies out there that have a package that you can buy, and you use AI to create your marketing materials, right? And they're quite good. So the second category is more specific to your business, right? So business critical. Another way of saying that would have been this uses your own data, right? The first one is really just, you can apply it for everything. The business critical one, this is sort of using your own data and impacting your specific business processes, not just sort of any employee task. And I think what's important there is identifying the use cases that are most relevant for this technology, right? So it's important to know that AI does not apply to everything, right? There's stuff that is not good for, right? It's not going to replace credit scoring. It's not going to replace, fraud modeling or anything like that. That is very numerically based, at least not in the near future. But it is very good at things where the output is text or images. Basically the output is unstructured, and the biggest plays, or maybe the most widely spread case of that is, any kind of customer communication, right? So customer communication by nature is unstructured. It's text or it's voice or, something of that nature. And so that's probably applies to any business. Any business has customer communication. And the things that are on here are basically examples of that, right? So what does that mean? You don't want to, I mean, today, in my opinion, you don't want to launch this directly to customers just yet. And the example that James mentioned earlier on the UK company that had a big hiccup was that, that's one example. There are other examples. When you put it directly in the hands of customers, strange things can happen. The AI can behave in ways that you don't want, which can either offend customers, or customers can, kind of tweak it in a way that you don't want. So that's probably dangerous. But what you can do is put it in the hands of the people that communicate with customers. So that's what this is, right? So think of your call center employees. So many companies are now employing this in call centers, where, I'm not talking about an AI-driven chatbot. I'm talking about an AI-driven solution that we put in the hands of your call center representatives, so they can find answers very quickly, while they're on the call with the customer, rather than putting the customer on hold for 2 minutes and creating a bad experience. So that's one. Sales is a big one. Sort of empowering your salespeople with materials that are customized to the prospect that they're meeting, today, and putting that in the hands of them, so they have stuff that they can put in front of the customer that looks a lot more professional, a lot more customized than what they used to do. Or any kind of other customer. So insurance claims is another big place where there's a lot of communication with customers, right? So sending emails automatically, answering claims, asking for additional material on claims, any kind of communication around insurance claims. That's another big area where that sort of applies. So think of areas where the output is unstructured, meaning text or images, and you have a lot of it, and you need your own data to do it. I think those would be the first places I would look for business critical applications. the one that James talked a lot about is this sort of business model change. So that's the third column here. And there's a lot going on, in that space, and you kind of have to figure out whether that affects you or not. And it probably will affect more people than we think today. But the examples we put on here, there's personalized education. There's a TED talk by Saul Khan, for example, who runs an education company, who's kind of made this work in offering courses that are really adjusting to the learner in a very individual way. So is that eventually going to revolutionize our whole education system? Well, maybe, so that's something to watch for sure. I think the legal profession is hugely impacted. When you think about what a lot of sort of the the entry level or lower tier lawyers do in a firm, there's a lot of research, right? There's a lot of case law research, research on anything that might impact the particular case at hand. So a lot of that can be done by AI much faster. And then there's a lot of document creation and document analysis, and there's just a lot of writing, and that can also be done by AI much faster. So when you think about it, a large part of what consumes a lawyer's day can be improved by AI. So I got to believe that's going to change the business model of that profession to some degree. Now, it doesn't mean we won't have lawyers. We'll have lawyers, but they may be spending their time in very different things than they are today, at least in proportion. So those are some examples. I mean, there's other examples like, social media influencing, where you already have, like, instead of human beings, you have, avatars, constructed AI individuals that are getting huge following on social media, and that are influencing, and it's sort of an abstraction away from the human, which can be quite useful. Or you have, on the marketing side, if you produce apparel or produce, clothes or shoes or handbags, that now gets modeled by AI rather than human beings, which is also a big business model change for them. So there's a lot of that. I mean, I think with many of those things, so you do have to think about governance. We talked about it earlier a little bit, especially in the middle category here on the business critical. Think about business. Think about business, the governance of the solution for your business, and think about where you stand on this, right? So, like James said, regulation is being developed, but it's behind, right? And it's probably going to take a year or two before any meaningful regulation will come out that directly impacts your business. So in the meantime, you got to sort of think, what do you stand for? What is okay and what's not okay? So I would recommend for everybody to have, think about their AI ethics and how they want to govern that, inside their company. But this is how we would describe sort of use cases you should watch out for.
I think for me, all of this, you have to sort of pick the time frame and the time horizon you want to look at this on as well, because to use like an analogy, if we're in the 56K dial-up version of the internet right now with AI, the use cases and what was possible there was very broad, but also limited by the capability of the internet at the time and its abundance in homes and the speed it could achieve. And as it got faster and faster, as fiber to your home and gigabit connection speeds started to become the norm, the possibilities of what could be disrupted and what could suddenly be delivered through that broadened out massively, and coupled with it, as we saw, devices like smartphones mean I can have the internet on the go. Suddenly I've got GPS on my phone, and the whole sat-nav industry has been heavily disrupted. So right now, it feels like we're still in the early days of this stuff, and industries and business models that look safe today look untouched. It's probably just a matter of when, not if, for many of them, as to when they're going to be impacted significantly. So you need to think, is your organization one that plans on a long-term horizon or a much more short-term focused iteration? If you take something like insurance claims, I was speaking to the chief innovation officer of one of our clients, we were talking about how AI is going to impact them, and he was envisioning a world with claims where they'd be gathering real-time data, take weather, and they'd be able to do something like, well, we can see winds of this speed coming from this direction right next to the building that we're insuring, and we're able to model out and predict that that is going to cause X amount of damage. So we're going to proactively pay out a claim before it's been even made by the customer there. Now, whether or not the insurance industry will get to that point or not, I don't know, but that kind of thing would offer a completely fundamental change in what people would expect and how insurance would be delivered to customers. So yeah, a lot of this I think is what time horizon are you looking on and thinking about with it? So we're going to do another poll, Sophie.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm just going to launch it. This time we're going to ask you how far along you are with implementing any AI initiative in your company. So again, ranging from not at all or haven't started, or all the way to we are nailing it and already seeing value from our AI initiatives. No right or wrong answers. As James and Glenn have said, it will depend vastly, it will differ vastly between industries and the types of organisations we're in. But it's really good to get a feel for where everyone is in their AI journey at the moment. So I'll leave that up for a couple more seconds. You can see that most people have answered.
There's a real spread as well there. Definitely interested, throw in the chat if you're someone who's down in those implemented first pilots or scaling out programs. What kind of thing is it that you're doing? Is it that traditional AI kind of models? Is it product recommendations, for example, or are you racing forward with generative AI implementations? Keen to hear, but yeah, really interesting. It's a bell curve, I guess, from the looks of it. So maybe perhaps exactly what we should be expecting from it. So we've talked about impact and the different ways that we might be affected by AI, from fundamental business model change all the way through just to the day-to-day running and making our businesses more efficient. And I'd like to summarize those three categories we've just talked about back there as sort of do what we're doing just faster. So great, help our coders write code more quickly. And do what we're doing but differently. So we're still going to interact and support our customers, but we're going to change from human call centers to AI enabled ones or whatever it happens to be, and do something different entirely because our core offering has been disrupted. But it's not just that straightforward. You can't just spin on a dime and suddenly implement this stuff and magically be successful. Just like any kind of change, any kind of new technology, there's like an awful amount of work and things that you have to think about. So we've put together a framework to help people understand what groundwork needs to be laid and the kind of things that you need to be taken care of. So that starts with AI impact in the middle. So if you're familiar with Simon Sinek's Start With Why talk, great, and the framework you'll see borrows from that in terms of its thinking. If you've never looked at that, I highly recommend checking it out. It's a great presentation. But this starts with why in the middle, which is about assessing AI's impact on your business. Are you in a place where your business model is going to be fundamentally disrupted and you need to pivot? Or is this more about operational efficiencies? Or if for some reason you don't think actually it's going to impact you at all and there's very little to do? Again, that time horizon piece is really important there. You talking about we need to get ready for 10 years time, or it's now, we are being disrupted right now, we need to react really quick. So you've got to start with that why. Why are we doing this? What do we want to get out of it? How is it going to impact to us? Why do we need to react to this? From there, then, you need to look at how you're going to incorporate AI into your core strategy. If that's business model change fundamentally, then it's definitely going to be about, okay, how do you pivot your business into these new opportunities and avoid being the Blockbusters of the world, or the horse and cart company that didn't adapt? If it's about operational efficiency, if that's really where it's going to hit you the most, then you'd probably be looking at things like, do I need to change my hiring strategy? And what's it going to do to profitability? Do I need a different investment plan ahead? Importantly, this is about updating and rethinking your core strategies that are in place already. So I think in the short term, we're going to see AI strategies being important, but actually this is much more about your core fundamental business strategies and assessing and reviewing if it's right. I think in the long run, we won't see AI strategies in the same way that you don't have an internet strategy. If you do have an internet strategy, I'd love to hear from you and hear about what's in it. But for most of us, internet is just a way to deliver services and goods and interact with people and communicate and all sorts of things. It's not something that we fundamentally create a separate strategy for. I think that's the route AI needs to head in the long run. It needs to be baked into our business. So this is the sort of how bit of it. How are we going to address that why? What are we going to change about our business? From there, then, we've got the sort of what bit of it. So 5 big areas that we need to think about are governance, our AI-empowered workforce, which is all our people, our AI transformation, which is about our day-to-day operating models and how we need to evolve, our AI-ready data assets, because data is a really important part of this, and the technologies that we need to deploy there. So talk about those in a bit more detail. There's a bit more information hanging off the edge here. So if we start with governance, and sorry, Glenn, did you want to?
Yeah. I mean, I actually on governance, I think that's that's pretty key, because that's something that can really make you shine or trip you up quite a bit. So I mean I really recommend that every company who wants to meaningfully use this technology have and think about their AI ethics, have an AI ethics statement that they write for their company, and have AI ethics procedures that allow them to to make that that AI ethics policy a reality in the organization, as well as have a couple of steering committees that basically make sure that everybody in the company adheres to the AI ethics that you have said. I think that's pretty key, because you're creating solutions that produce communications that indirectly or directly goes to customers, and if something goes wrong, that's really going to impact your plan quite a bit. So I think governance is key. And really, I think you have to think about it ahead of regulations and laws coming out, because if you trip up, your customers won't care whether you met the regulation. They'll care about the impact to people, and so that will matter quite a bit.
And I think that's where my experience, I've seen a lot of people start is firstly putting up the walls and stopping access to some of these tools and being very limited. But for the more mature kind of AI products out there, is really starting to think about ethics and bias and the problems that might occur, and getting that kind of thing under control. So yeah, AI governance is all about that, fundamentally about risk management in your organization, and making sure that you are behaving and operating with AI in a way that you're comfortable with, that you've got the right principles in place for it, you are compliant and understand that legal and regulatory landscape you might operate in, that you are in control with governance policies, and people understand what they can and can't do with these tools to avoid horrible and ugly mistakes with this stuff. And we're going to see some problems coming as people rush and don't think about these things enough. Moving them around, in our sort of AI empowered workforce, a bit of language I hear a lot at the moment is about co-pilot, not autopilot. So this is about enabling people, supercharging them, and their ability to do their job. So in order to make that happen, we need to make sure we've got the right training programs to upskill people and help them leverage these tools. I think the generative AI world is fundamentally heading towards being a core digital skill set, like being able to use a word processor or a spreadsheet, that people are going to be expected to do and use as part of their job to be efficient. We need to think about the skills and the roles that we want to hire to really benefit from these things. Leadership engagement is super important, getting a bought-in leadership team that is demonstrating from the top why this stuff is important and how to use it. It's a fundamental part of any kind of change piece. And obviously good comms around this is crucial. I think this can be a scary concept for people. It can look like it's threatening their jobs and their positions. So actually it needs to be really well managed, really well communicated about what we're doing, why we're doing it. Hopefully that it's to empower people to do their jobs better, not replace them. Down in AI transformation then, so this is, how do you move to this world? And I think change management here is going to be incredibly important. When you think about how many processes are going to be fundamentally disrupted and changed as part of this, it's going to require excellent change management capabilities. And building an AI positive culture there so that people are bought in, get the value, and are desiring these things to supercharge their parts of the business. We've put product here, and I think products are really super important mindset to have in place with AI transformation, because AI is fundamentally unpredictable. You can't guarantee you're going to get results that you expect and want from building any kind of model and using any kind of these tools. So being able to pivot and iterate quickly, be focused on value and focused on the customer is a really important way to develop this stuff. The AI-ready data assets. For me, I think this is one of the ones that is going to be the long-term differentiator for many businesses. So while at the moment there's a first mover advantage to getting these tools rolled out and plugged into your business, in the long run, it's going to be commodity. Everyone's going to have access to it. All the models are going to perform much of a muchness with each other. The thing that can separate you from the rest of the pack is going to be your unique insights, your unique data that you've got that you can use to fuel these models. Think back to that flattening technologies and the ways we can respond. This is about that customer insight piece. What do you know better than anyone else that you can use with AI?
And maybe one nuance on the, on the data. I think what's novel. I mean, you obviously all have, your data management platforms and all this. What's new about the large language model technology is, much better use of unstructured data. So, don't just think about sort of your current data infrastructure that you have, but how usable, accessible is your unstructured data that might be feeding into these models now, right? So a lot of people haven't thought about that, and there's a lot of pre-processing and post-processing that needs to be done on unstructured data. You need different kinds of databases for unstructured data, more vector databases and not numerical databases. So there is an additional data component that even if you had a very good data management program in the past, you have to look at the add-ons that come with unstructured data, processing, availability, and management. So that's sort of a prerequisite on the left side here. And I think on the right side here, the training and education of both leadership as well as your employees is kind of a bit of a prerequisite for the change management. Change management is probably the single biggest challenge out of anything on this slide, and a lot of training and education and getting people used to it needs to happen before change management can really be effective.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with change management. I think that's going to be one of the key differentiators for people on being successful or not. And on data, whether it's unstructured data, I think that data collection point's there because you need to start looking ahead and thinking about what might I want to be doing in future with AI that needs data that I don't currently collect and don't currently think about, perhaps because it's not been data that I've historically been able to meaningfully use. So it's never made sense to collect, because you need to start thinking about it now, because there's going to be work involved to start collecting that properly and getting it in place so that as and when you want to do something, you have it there. So the last piece on this is about the technologies. So of course, there's AI platforms that you need to think about for deploying and running your models. But I think some of the more important challenges are going to be, how are you integrating AI into your core business systems and bringing it to where people live and work, whether that's CRMs and ERPs, finance systems, you name it. But also the AI governance systems. So it's one thing to have a written set of policies, but you've also got to think about, how do you actually enforce those policies? How do you monitor what's going on to make sure you are being compliant, that your AI isn't evolving into something you don't want it to be and misperforming and so on. That's going to be a really growing sector, I think, when it comes to AI. and having that AI ops, so the like DevOps, the ability to see a machine learning AI project from conception through to delivery and operation. So with an on time, and to wrap us up, there's a lot to think about and do in that framework there. And it can be really intimidating to know where to start, because there's a million things that you can be rushing off doing, from building use cases to writing policies and so on, or even just getting lost in analysis paralysis as you try and figure out what the hell does this mean for me. So to wrap us up, Glenn's just going to take us through a sort of quick starter checklist of things that you can do today, that you can walk out of here and start getting on with, that will move you forward.
Yeah, so obviously, you're all on sort of different phases of this this AI adoption process, as we saw in the poll, there. But it seemed like, very few of you have like, many use cases already fully deployed. So some of this will be relevant to you and some of it won't be. But starting at the beginning, I mean, obviously, the first step is sort of to make it accessible to your employees, kind of in the first column of use cases, software development and marketing and so on, and legal, to just have, give people access to the tools, but give them access in a secure way so that your data doesn't get, either leaked out, or even your data doesn't get used to build the next version of GPT, right? So you don't want that to happen, because that would, get in the hands of your competitors. That would not be good. But, so give access, but give access in a controlled way. The next one is sort of, once you give access, or together with giving access, you want to give people clear guidance on what's okay to use, and what what is it okay to use it for, and what is it not okay to use it for, right? So that probably requires collaboration between, legal, compliance, analytics, and the main, sort of business people in the company, to come up with, with some relatively clear guidelines on what's okay to do with AI and what's not okay to do with AI. And that, and you can, I mean, there's many templates out there that you can use for this. I'm sure your favorite law firm would love to work with you on it. But at the end of the day, you have to create something that makes sense for you. And then you have to create a way of, monitoring that's actually being followed. The next is sort of on the training side. You obviously have to give some training to your leadership team. And then you have to give some training to, other sort of relevant stakeholders in the company. I mean, I like to put it as you have to teach your lawyers a little bit about technical AI, and you have to teach your data scientists and engineers a little bit about, about ethics and legal concerns. So, I think that's relevant. But then, of course, you have to teach your leadership team a lot about what's all of the possible, with AI, and then they can figure out how it's going to affect the business models. So, so education materials, both for leadership, for the wider business, and then for specific areas like engineering and data science and legal. I think that's key. And then, of course, now you're ready, or maybe in parallel to all this, you're looking at use cases. And now you're looking at sort of, what we earlier had in the second column of, business critical type use cases. And as you evaluate use cases, you should look at, okay, what is a good use case specifically for generative AI, right? This is not your, your marketing response models, or your, media mix models that you already have good solutions for. This is new stuff where, the output is unstructured. That's what you're looking for. And you're looking for, something that's actually meaningful enough for your business to put infrastructure in place to do it, because it's not cheap. And at the same time, it's a good use case for this specific technology, and it's something you have the data for to do. If your data is not ready, then, it's probably too early. So identify use cases that are, big enough to be worthwhile, but also doable, and that don't get you in trouble with consumers, right away. So, don't start with something that goes right to consumers. And then, for the more business model change type things, reevaluate the business strategy in light of AI. What, how will this technology ultimately change your business, in small or big ways, and then find a way to prepare for that or respond to that. So obviously there's 100 other things that you could be doing, but if you had to synthesize it to a sort of progressive list, this is what it is.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Sophie, do you want to wrap us up as we're nearly at
Yeah,
time?
nearly at time. I was just thinking, like, it's never enough time when we're talking about a topic like this, is it? Like, you think, can you fill an hour? And then the discussion starts. So thank you, everybody who's been in the chat. Some really interesting insights in there. If you are keen to talk about this topic more with us, there are lots of ways you can get involved. So we have a brilliant AI scorecard. QR code on the screen now if you want to have a go, give you some ideas about where you might like to start. For those of you in the UK and able to travel into London, we do have a masterclass for data leaders on this topic. James is also hosting that one for us next month. Very happy to share some more details about it. Or if you'd like to speak with him one-on-one, perhaps on a virtual call, get some guidance from our hosts today on your AI strategy. Again, the options there. And of course, you can find us all on LinkedIn. We'd very much like to connect with you there, follow, see how you're getting on with your own AI journeys. If there's anything specific out of these that you'd like us to follow up with, you can let us know in the webinar expectations poll that we've just launched. It's really good feedback for us. If you can let us know how you found the topic today, was it what you expected? And when do you think you can take some of this information and start using it in your organizations? And is there anything that you'd like us to do as a follow-up? Might have time for just maybe one question. And one that I thought was really useful that come up is, what would you say to an organization that had gone out and already started rolling out lots of different AI tech, but haven't put in place any of the governance, ethics, policy training that we've talked about today? What are your thoughts, maybe, Glenn?
Well, first of all, I'd say that's that's probably something you need to immediately pay attention to, because I mean, obviously, if you're in a highly regulated industry, then it's even more critical. But if you have if you have this stuff that's indirectly or directly going to consumers, then it's more critical. If it's purely back office, then maybe you only have to worry about copyright and things like that. But what's different about generative AI is that even measuring whether the solution is working well is can be challenging, because if you're generating a text answer to a consumer or a salesperson or whatever, was that answer good or was it not, requires a lot of labeling of these responses, which in itself can be a challenge. But I think labeling will be key. And also everything else that's there for model governance, everything that was there for model governance for all of your existing models that are not generative AI, still transfers over to generative AI. It's just a little bit harder to measure. So, you got to sort of be aware of, well, model governance, pre-generative AI, and then, the additional add-on issues that come with generative AI. So, if you get the governance wrong and consumers are impacted, that can be really dangerous. Definitely get on that. And I mean, also, so if I'm not on this page, but if you want to follow up with me in any way, you can find me on LinkedIn easily. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any follow-up questions for me, then send me a note on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. We are on the top of the hour. So just say thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Thank you to our brilliant hosts for your input. Really hope to see you on a webinar in the near future. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.